to learn some math. Dang it, math.
Alright, so we're going to solve systems again, but this time we're going to use substitution, okay? So your learning target is I can solve for solutions of systems of linear equations by substitution. Let's go through some of our notes now. First thing we're going to talk about is solving systems by substitution. So in order to solve systems using substitution, the first thing that we want to do is solve for one variable in at least one equation, if necessary. Okay, sometimes we're going to have a variable that's already solved for it. And we can choose if we want to solve for x. We can choose if we want to solve for y. It really doesn't matter. The point is that you want to choose to solve for one variable in at least one equation. Okay, if we need to. Second thing we need to do is once we've solved for that variable, we need to substitute the expression into the other equation. So we've got y is equal to something, and then we take that something and put it in for y in the other equation. Third thing that we would need to do is solve the equation to get the value of the first variable. Okay, once we've substituted, then we would only be working in one variable, so we need to solve for that variable. Then, once we solve for that variable, the fourth thing we need to do is substitute that value into one of the original equations and solve. Okay, so we plug it back into our original equation and solve. And then the last thing we need to do, the fifth thing, is to write the values from steps 3 and 4 as an ordered pair, just like I showed you here, x, y, and that is your solution. X, y as your solution. So let's go ahead and solve for example 1 here. We're given, it says solve the following system by substitution. We're given two equations. Now, if you remember what the very first thing we needed to do was, you go back up there, it says the first thing is to solve for one variable in at least one solution. Okay, or in at least one equation. What we see here is that we already have one in one equation. Okay, y equals 2x minus 3 is already solved for y. So step 1 is already done. So the second thing we need to do is substitute the expression into the other equation. So we're going to use what we know about y. Y is 2x minus 3, okay? 2x minus 3 is y. They're the exact same thing. So we're going to write this equation now, 2x plus 7y equals negative 5. But instead of using y, we're going to use 2x minus 3. Okay? And if we do that, we see that all we have now is the variable x. We can actually solve for what x is equal to because all we have is the one variable. Alright, so now third step is to solve that equation to get the value of the first variable. So let's go ahead and do that. The first thing we want to do is distribute the 7. 7 times 2x, remember we've got 2x still, 7 times 2x is 14x. And 7 times negative 3 is negative 21. Is equal to negative 5. So we can combine our like terms. We've got 2x and 14x make 16x. And we'll also want to add 21 to both sides. So our combination of like terms is 16x. The 21 cancels itself out. Negative 5 plus 21 is a positive 16. And finally divide by 16 on both sides. And we're going to end up getting x is equal to 1. Okay, so that's the value of x. X is equal to 1. Now we need to go ahead and continue solving this solution, this system. The fourth thing is to substitute the value into the original equation and solve. Okay, so we're going to substitute this value of x into our original equation, which our original equation was y equals 2x minus 3, but instead of x, we're going to use the value that we just found for x, which was 1, and then subtract 3. Now, all we have to do is just solve for y. 2 times 1 is just 2. That means we're left with y is equal to negative 1. Okay? That fifth step there is to write the values from steps 3 and 4 as an ordered pair, x, y, as your solution. So we already put x is 1, now we just put y is negative 1. And that is the solution for this systems of equations. Let's do example 2 now. It says solve the following system by substitution. Again, we have to solve for one of our variables first, okay? And I always find that it's easier to solve for a variable that has a coefficient of a positive 1, if at all possible. And we see right up here, both of these, x has a coefficient of 1, but this one is a negative 1. Therefore, I'm going to use this equation and solve for x, because all I have to do is add 4y to both sides. So I'm going to end up getting x is equal to, we added 4y to both sides, 4y plus 16. Okay, so now we've got these two equations, and I already know what x is equal to. X is equal to 4y plus 16, so I can use 4y plus 16, this amount, and substitute that in for x in this equation, the other equation. Okay, so let's do that. We've got a negative now, 4y plus 16. I always like to put whatever we plug in for our variable in parentheses, just to make sure that we are applying any negatives or anything that we need to. Minus 2y equals 14. We need to distribute that negative through the parentheses, so it's going to be a negative 4y minus 16 minus 2y equals 14. We're going to have to add 16 to both sides, as well as combine our like terms. Negative 4y minus 2y is a negative 6y equals 30. 14 plus 16 is 30. And then finally, just divide by negative 6 on both sides, and we end up getting y is equal to a negative 5. Okay, now that we found what y is equal to, now all we have to do is go back and solve for x, right? You plug negative 5 in for y into your original equation and solve for x. So we've got x minus 4 times negative 5. Remember, this is the equation I'm using now, and I'm just substituting negative 5 in for y. And this whole thing is equal to 16. Now I can solve for x, and we'll be very happy, right? Negative 4 times negative 5 is a positive 20, so x plus 20 now is equal to 16. We just need to subtract 20 from both sides. We end up getting x is equal to negative 4. Okay, now we found what x is, we found what y is. We can just substitute that into, or plug that into our coordinate. X is negative 4, y is negative 5. So our answer is negative 4, negative 5. Alright, last example here. We got example 3. We're doing the exact same thing, but at times you're going to find we have an equation that doesn't necessarily come out too evenly. There's no coefficient of x. We don't have any, no coefficient of 1 for any value of x or value of y. So it's going to take a little bit more work, right? The best way to do this is to choose which variable you want to solve for and then plug that variable in and continue the system. I see here that 4 and 2 are all even numbers, and 2 goes into 4 and 2 goes into 10. So I feel like that would be the best one to solve for, because then I'm going to at least get an even number, right? So we're going to go ahead and solve for y on this equation. And to do that, I would have to add 4x to both sides. And I would be left with a positive 2y is equal to 4x minus 10. And then I can just divide by 2 on both sides to end up getting y is equal to, 4 divided by 2 is 2x, negative 10 divided by 2 is a negative 5. So instead of this equation now, I've got y equals 2x minus 5. And that's a lot easier to look at. Plus, we've already solved for our variable of y. So now we just substitute this value right here, 2x minus 5, into the other equation in for y. So let's go ahead and do that now. We've got 8x minus 6 times 2x minus 5. And that is equal to 22. Now it's solving for the value of x, so we're going to first distribute our 6 into both the parentheses here. We're going to be left with 8x. Negative 6 times 2x is a negative 12x. Negative 6 times negative 5 is a positive 30. All that's going to equal 22. So we can combine our like terms and subtract 30 from both sides. We're going to get 8x minus 12x is a negative 4x. And 22 minus 30 is a negative 8. Finally, just divide by negative 4. And we end up seeing that x is equal to 2. Okay, now that we know what x is equal to, we have to plug that back into our original equation and solve for y. So our original equation being negative 4x, which instead of x we're using 2, remember, plus 2y is equal to negative 10. Okay, just simplify this, solve for y. Negative 4 times 2 is negative 8. Plus 2y equals negative 10. We have to add 8 to both sides. We're going to end up with 2y is equal to negative 2. And then divide by 2. And finally we see y is equal to negative 1. Y is equal to negative 1. So our solution for this in a coordinate form is 2, negative 1. So, at the beginning of this, our whole goal was to figure out how to solve solutions of systems. Okay, this is what we've done, and we've used the method of substitution.